We are live.
WebEx Assistant is enabled to save audio highlights.
Thank you.
Well, that sounds great. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad everybody's here with us for another exciting meeting. I think we got some good things on tap and some good conversations of where we've been and where we're going, and a presentation on the apprenticeship program in North Carolina, which is good to for all of us to hear about as we work on the apprentice teacher piece. Dr. Graham, I'll hand it over to you if you want to kick it off, share any comments.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. Thank you for making time for our conversation this afternoon. To Dr. Fleming's point, we are excited about the discussion that we'll have today as we delve a little bit more into the apprenticeship area and continue to unpack the work of this subcommittee. So we will advance, and we'll start by taking a look at the agenda. That agenda was sent to you by Dr. Evans via email prior to the meeting. It's attached to the newsletter that we receive monthly from Dr. Evans. We will need to approve this agenda. So if you will please look over the agenda, and I will accept a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. This is Catherine.
Second, this is Marcy.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that we accept the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. All those opposed, please say nay. Thank you very much. Agenda approved. Also, Dr. Evans sent out the minutes from the August 26th meeting. You have those in your email as well. At this moment, I will accept the motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. This is Chet Alderman.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second, Bill Griffin.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the minutes from the August 26th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Minutes are approved. Thank you very much. At this moment, we will remind you of some of the norms for our subcommittee. Won't go through all these, but just want to remind everyone that the work of this subcommittee is led by the interests and needs of North Carolina students and educators. We want to make certain that as we engage in our conversation this afternoon, that no one person dominates the conversation, as all opinions are valued, and we do not want to diminish the opinions of others. We also ask that you please remain fully engaged in the conversation throughout the day. Dr. Fleming, anything you'd like to add, sir?
No, I think you articulated that very well on our norms.
Right. Reminders about our guiding principles. We have two. Does your idea have impact on students, and is it measurable in an authentic setting, i.e. in the presence of students and their learning? Also, before we move further, I always like to make certain that we remember the charge of this subcommittee. You will find that charge statement in the newsletter. And as I always do, I will read this charge to you so we keep it at the forefront of our minds. The charge reads as follows: by January 1, 2022, the Budget and Compensation Subcommittee will prepare and submit a plan to Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission that accomplishes the following 4 items. Number 1, articulates the salaries for the licensed tiers in the certification framework. Number 2, provides specifics for the required hold harmless provision. Number 3, integrates out-of-state certified candidates into the framework. And number 4, proposes a detailed budget plan for the Office of State Budget and Management that supports the compensation framework. So I just want to remind everyone what we are here to get accomplished, and keep in mind that the January 1, 2022 date is our target to get our work completed. At this time, we will kind of remind you where we are in our timeline, our continuum of work. It's hard to see on this screen, but in that very last row on the left side, the budget and compensation group, by the end of October, we should have accomplished 3 things: determining the minimum salary scenarios for each license level, determining the amount of professional advancement accounts, and determining the hold harmless provisions. So we are positioning ourselves to achieve those 3 things by October 30th, 2021. Dr. Fleming, anything you might like to add at this point, sir?
Well, no, I think we've done a lot of good work, but I know sometimes when we accomplish really good things, we want to let off the gas a little and say, hey, we've done a good job. But we do have 2, as we are coming up, 2 very important pieces left, and a lot of pieces underneath them left. And so we don't want to let up from the gas, and I appreciate everybody's hard work, and we will get there.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Are there any questions from any of the subcommittee members before we advance into our conversation for the day? Okay.
Dr. Fleming?
Yes.
My apologies. This is Marcy from Wake. Based on our conversation at our last meeting, and the recommendation from Mr. Martin up in Watauga, and have we had a discussion about how we might include going forward any finance directors or finance officers in our work, given the potential significant impact to local budgets?
We have not, and I talked to Mr. Martin as well on that, and I do think we need to probably have that conversation if we need to add finance officers to the subcommittee. That will have to be done really with Dr. Miller and the chairman of PEPSC, and I have not had that conversation, but when the next time we have a sub-chair meeting, we will have that conversation, because I think there are some good points to that of having finance officers on here.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. And I appreciate you letting me ask that question.
It's a great question. Thank you for bringing that back to the forefront, Marcy. Other questions? All right, we're hearing none. In the August meeting, we indicated that we wanted to spend some more time delving into the apprenticeship area of the Pathways to Excellence framework. We had some questions about salary levels for this range, and whether or not those salary levels will be in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act. So we have joining us today to engage in further conversation about the apprenticeship component, Mr. Dale Yarborough from Apprenticeship North Carolina Supervisor of the North Carolina Community Colleges, and Ms. Olivia Rice, Education Research Analyst, RTI, Ms. Edna Wallace, Education Consultant, RTI. So we want to turn the floor over to our guest, who will engage us in a conversation that will span about an hour in length, so that we delve deeper into the apprenticeship component of the framework. So thank you all for being with us this afternoon. We'll turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Graham. Would you prefer I turn my camera on, or should I leave it off as I do the presentation?
That's up to you. We'll leave that up to you completely.
Okay. Well, I am going to share my camera, myself with you guys initially. I just want everyone to see me while I introduce myself. As stated by Dr. Graham, I'm with the NC Community College System Office, and on behalf of Dr. Bruce Mack and Kathy Costello, the Director of Apprenticeship, I want to thank you for inviting me to be with you guys this afternoon. And to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a native of North Carolina. Grew up here, and after high school joined the Air Force, 22 years of service. Completed that and came to work for the state for the past 20 years. So I've done a lot of service for the state, federal government, and I really appreciate being able to do the things that I've done. And I look forward to many more years with the state and the present job that I'm in. So To get right to our discussion today, I'm going to stop sharing my video. So if you get to the next slide. When we talk about apprenticeship, we consider it to be a talent-driven training strategy. As you guys know, due to COVID, a lot of small, medium, and large companies, they're having issues with actually finding talent, keeping talent. Folks are moving to different jobs. So we think that registered apprenticeship would be an opportunity for them to recruit talent and hold on to that talent once they get them on board and get them trained up. Next slide. So today we'll be talking about some of the benefits and the components of registered apprenticeship. And as you can see on the screen here, I won't read it. The different components are laid out here, and we will kind of dive a little bit deeper into them as we move through this presentation. Next. So why registered apprenticeship? Well, we consider registered apprenticeship to be the gold standard of training, and it allows an employer to be competitive by actually growing their own. In most cases, as stated before, the workforce trying to find that qualified, experienced person to come on board and pick up and take care of the different things that need to be done as far as the occupation or the job might require. It has become harder and harder for our employers to find that. So in actually developing training and growing their own and molding them and shaping them in the way they want them to be has definitely been a proven way of making sure that those individuals they stay with the company. The retention is higher, higher productivity. So this model, as stated here, it has been tested over centuries and centuries. Apprenticeship has been around, and I think it's here to stay. It's just employers' willingness to embrace the training model, and in turn, seeing how it can make a difference in their business. As far as adaptable and flexible, the apprenticeship model, it is very adaptable. It's not the only solution. It is a solution for dealing with the shortcomings of business and the training and the skills gaps that need to be filled. But it is definitely a way to help those employers reach and meet their training needs. Next slide. Over the next several slides, we're going to take a look at what's been going on here in North Carolina. This chart and graphs, as you can see, from 2017 through 2021, the number of apprentices that have been registered in the state of North Carolina. And as you can see, we've been, ticking upward over the past years until COVID hit. And as you can see in the second chart where there has been a decline. Although we have been registering a lot of programs, we just have not been registering as many apprentices. And hopefully as we move through this this era that we're in, things will start to pick up and get folks back to work. And as you can see from the chart, the different industry sectors and the percentages of apprentices that are registered in each one of those industry sectors. Next slide. We also work with a lot of high school students. Employers have found that they can go out and recruit and market to high school students and put those individuals in pre-apprenticeships, an opportunity for them to vet those students to determine, hey, is this going to be a good relationship? Is this person really interested in this type of occupation? Do they have the, the willingness to really look at this as a career path versus just a summer job? An opportunity for that employer to look at those pre-apprentices to determine, are they really a good fit for the company? So as you can see in the chart here, the number of pre-apprentices that have been served over the past 5 years, up until 2020, it was a steady climb. 2021, it kind of declined. And we're talking about high school students predominantly, where different employers have gone into the high school system and looked at hiring those 17, 18-year-old students. As far as active, as you can see, the numbers again, they kind of ticked up, and then 2020 kind of dropped, but have started to pick up again. Employers are, things have changed, I guess, on the plant floors, and more employers are out there looking at high school students as a pipeline to bring them on board and get them as employees, full-time employees. And again, the chart to the right, it shows you the percentages for the different industry sectors indicated. Next slide. This chart right here, it shows all apprentices that are 25 and older that have been served. And again, the first chart, you can see that things have been going well. And again, based on the COVID-19 and everything, the second chart shows you how that things started to decline in 2020, and right now in 2021, we're kind of holding steady right now, and things are starting to pick up. More and more employers are coming back to developing training programs to help meet those needs that based on the losses that they found. And the chart to the right again shows different industry sectors that the youth apprentices or pre-apprentices are working in. Next slide. So does apprenticeship programs, is there a positive return on investment? We had a study done with the Labor and Economic Analysis Division, and it was determined based on the different employers that were surveyed that there is a positive return on investment. As you can see, 300 manufacturing and construction companies, we had a pretty significant response, and the response showed that apprentice programs were increasing employee skills and flexibility. So from the very beginning, with those employers that we have registered and those surveys that were sent out to them, the response shows that apprenticeship programs are working for those employers. The turnover, I mentioned higher retention, as well as, it doesn't stay here, but the productivity has gone higher too. Next slide. %86 of the respondents have achieved a positive ROI. As you can see from the chart, increasing flexibility, improving productivity, finding qualified candidates for employment. As you can see, all these are roughly 6% or higher. The reducing wage costs, that was a whole lot lower, but in most cases, the employers, those positive percentages concerning the flexibility, productivity, employment, they definitely outweighed that whole reducing wage cost, because in most cases, you have to pay those apprentices, a livable rate of pay, a living wage, and can't always start out, with minimum wage for these apprentices. Next slide. So the return on investment, as you can see, for every dollar, there's a $1.70 net value creation. So with that being said, apprenticeship is a definite way of getting folks trained. That training model has made a significant, improvement in the whole workforce and folks coming on board, getting trained, productivity, retention, and the value added is from day one. They can see that it's a positive step in the right direction on increasing the return on investment they put into these apprentices. Next. So what is registered apprenticeship? Registered apprenticeship is a system of work-based learning. It's designed to meet the needs of the employer while offering structured on-the-job learning, job-related education, rewards for skills gained. And at the end of all of that, there's a credential, state and federal credential that's received. Without the employer, there is no registered apprenticeship. The employers, they drive apprenticeship across the state, across the nation. And, trying to get them to understand what the training model, the concepts are all about. That's what we do. We go out and promote outreach, working with the community college system, workforce development, chambers, industry associations. We're just trying to educate so we can bring more and more employers to the table so that they can embrace this concept and see how it can make a difference in their businesses and show them that, there is a return on investment. Next slide. So as far as the different components, The structured on-the-job learning, it consists of at least a minimum of 2,000 hours of on-the-job training. So with that being said, you can have a program that's only a year long, or it can be up to 4, sometimes 5 years long, up to 10,000 hours of training. So, depending on how technical the training, the skills and experience that's needed will determine generally how long those training programs are. Next slide. The 3 different training models for each occupation that is being registered. You can have a time-based model where that basically means, hey, you have a 4-year, 8,000-hour program for each on-the-job training task. There's a set amount of hours associated with each task. And, from, that first hour up to 8,000 hours later, that person would have to go through a full 4 years of training. There is no early, completion or graduation from the program. They would have to go that set amount of time, whether it's 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, or 8,000 hours. The competency-based model, basically there is no number of hours required. They're being assessed, they're being tested, so that trainer, that mentor, that supervisor is identifying where the skills are lacking. So based on the assessment, they determine how experienced and how skilled that person is. And if they are, they meet the prerequisites, they can complete as early as 6 months, sometimes less. The hybrid training is a combination of the time and competency models, which we are seeing more and more employers looking at this model as a training model that they would like to use, because there's a range of hours. Any program that is, say, 4,000, 6,000, 8,000 hours long, there can be a range of, say, 6,000, 8,000, or 4 to 3 that allows a person to finish in a shorter period of time, become fully qualified and earn the credentials. Next slide. The job-related education piece is the piece where the employers are using a community college, university. It can be in-house training or a third party. It's an opportunity for that employer to help those apprentices that are in that training mode understand exactly why they're doing what they're doing, kind of the theory behind the job. And as you can see, each piece lends credibility to the next. So with the on-the-job training piece, that related instruction just helps that apprentice understand more and more what they're doing. And when we get to the wage piece, hey, when you get those skills and experience, you're experienced at a certain level, then you will get that pay increase. So at least for every 2,000 hours of on-the-job training, there must be at least a minimum of 144 hours of related classroom education. You can always have more, but you can never have less. Next slide. So the wage scale, we call it a progressive wage scale. Basically, it's that salary that apprentice is earning. There's a starting rate of pay, or the wages, when that person comes on board based on whatever assessments. And then there's a journey worker or fully qualified rate of pay. And in between those two, from the starting rate to the journey worker rate, there are gradual increases. As that person's skills and experiences are gained, their rate of pay normally increases. But that's how often it increases is up to the discretion of the employer or the sponsor. So based on credit for previous experience, if a person is given prior credit and they're put into training in year 2 or 3 versus year 1, that person would start at year 2 or 3 wages. So everything, just kind of coincides with one another. You have to assess them. You can or you don't have to award prior credit if you don't want to. Regardless of what their prior experience might be, you can start them out from day 1 as a brand new trainee. So the wages would reflect. Next slide. Concerning teacher exemption, I've spoken with the department, the U.S. Department of Labor, and I have a point of contact, a Linda Wickerson, wage and hour senior investigator. She's here in North Carolina, and she will be able to really speak to this teacher exemption, but I did get this information from her so that I could share this with you to show you that, you know, any teacher that has their state license is exempt. And then there are some other, I don't want to say categories, but if it states in the second paragraph, you know, if they are falling under the, I guess, the general principle of a teacher, they could also be considered exempt. So I say this to say, for more in-depth information about the teacher exemption as it pertains to, you know, this person or this teacher having a certificate versus not, and being put in a teacher role, I would, you know, say that Linda Wilkerson could answer any additional questions if the information in these two different paragraphs doesn't, you know, satisfy, you know, your need or your idea of, you know, hey, should a teacher be considered exempt or not? Next slide. So once everything is said and done, this person has come on board, you have trained them up, they have, you know, gone through all the classes, you know, the on-the-job training, they're at that level of experience that you need and require. The state credential, as you can see here, is awarded to them. It's from the state of North Carolina. We mirror what the U.S. Department of Labor does and give them that credential. So two credentials are awarded from the state of, well, are awarded when they complete their program. One from the state of North Carolina. In the next slide, this certificate is from the U.S. Department of Labor. It is a nationally recognized certificate, meaning it is recognized in all 50 states. It pretty much states that this person has completed a registered apprenticeship program in this occupation and are deemed fully qualified. Next slide. So, you know, hopefully we can, you know, be partners or essentially continue partnerships and develop partnerships with employers, community colleges, you know, workforce development boards. Pretty much any entity almost can be an apprenticeship sponsor, and that's our job, is to reach out, educate, and inform, and hopefully develop some type of partnership with them so that whatever needs that they feel needs to be met can be met through registered apprenticeship. Next slide. And that's pretty much the end of my presentation, and I hope I wasn't talking too fast, or if there's some questions that I can answer, or any way that we can, you know, find a way to work together and make this happen. That's what we're here for. Does anybody have any questions?
This is Tom. If nobody else has a question, I have one for you.
Okay.
So when you talked earlier about the skill development, so for our purposes, what we're trying to recognize is these folks don't have a qualifying degree to hold a full teaching license. And so
Right.
would progress towards completing the bachelor's degree, could you construe that as meeting the skill development?
Yes, sir. I would consider it as progress to meeting the skill development. Yes, they're going to be in the role of developing those skills to become a fully qualified, certified teacher. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, and yes, I would.
Well, so let me clarify. The whole licensure system is about acquiring skills and demonstrating skills, but the apprentice would be for people who don't yet, they may not have those skills, but they also don't have the bachelor's degree. So attaining the bachelor's degree would allow them to move into what we would consider a fully licensed teacher, and there would still be a period of skill development within that. But just for the purposes of the apprenticeship, we would say the primary goal is for that person to get a bachelor's, to complete the bachelor's degree.
Well, that can be the end result of the training, the on-the-job training as a part of the program. The related education piece could have written into that a pathway to earning a bachelor's degree.
Okay. All right. And then within that, but that would also, if we did it that way, that would also trigger some minimum standards for moving towards that attainment, right? So I thought
Whatever those payments
has to have so much progress towards that ultimate goal. Is that correct?
So however you want to write whatever wages, or if we're talking about the wage scale, however you want to define that or make that look concerning levels of education or whatever the case may be, that's something, the flexibility of the program will allow you to do it. Okay, so I would have to see what you're saying exactly. So I don't want to say, yes, you're 100% right, but I think that you are. But if you could lay out how your wage progression will look in conjunction with earning a bachelor's degree or any other type of certifications that you're requiring for this program, I would need to see it so I can say, yes, that's perfect, or no, you can't do it that way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Mr. Yarborough, we have a question in the chat and I'll read it for you. What if someone does have a bachelor's degree, but they want to try an apprenticeship to get in-school experience before becoming a teacher of record instead of doing a residency right away?
That's up to the apprenticeship program sponsor, whoever the sponsor of the program is, whatever the criteria that they say must be met, or if they will accommodate someone coming in with that level of education into the program. And if you did, what other requirements would need to be met? Would they need to have a higher wage, or would they, what are your minimum qualifications or standards for someone coming in at that nature? So the sponsor of the program kind of dictates how he wants or she wants the program standards to look. And so if there's nothing written in the standards to accommodate or follow that path of registering someone, then the program can always be revised and changed to address those kinds of situations. And you will see, no matter what program is written out there, in most cases they do need to be revised to address different situations that come up, so that whether it's the on-the-job training piece or the related education and or wage scale might need to be revised to address changes that they want to incorporate. I hope that kind of answers your question.
There's a second question in the chat. What are the advantages of being a registered apprenticeship federally versus just putting something into state law or regulation?
Well, I think as a registered apprentice, based on Office of Apprenticeship, U.S. Department of Labor guidelines, the registered apprenticeship model offers the end result are the credentials. But on the front side, is stating that he or she, that apprentice that is in the program, that they have hands-on experience. They have actually been through hands-on training and not just went through a course and received a document saying they completed X course. There are a lot of apprentice programs out there where people have been given certificates, but they have not been given any kind of work-based learning experience at all. So the big difference is there is a registered work-based learning experience along with the education piece and wages to go along with it. And then the end result, you do receive the federal credential that's nationally recognized that backs the fact that you were in a work-based learning experience that included the education piece as well as progressive wages.
Thank you, Mr. Yarborough. If you all have follow-up questions, by all means, please make certain you unmute and pose those. An additional question, Mr. Yarborough, going back to the residency bachelor's degree scenario, would they have to be enrolled in an educator preparation program, or could the training they get in school qualify for apprenticeship status?
The training in the school could qualify apprenticeship status, and you can add to that. So the flexibility, I keep going back to adaptability, flexibility. What do you really want the program to look like? What does the sponsor really want for this program? You know, the on-the-job training, the education piece, and it can be written in such a way that accommodates, you know, a lot of different, you know, issues or ways of dealing with folks with X amount of education or higher levels of education. So, you know, I think talking through it, trying to come up with a training outline that you think works, and continue to talk with us, myself or the director, Catherine Costellos, so we can say, yes, that can be done, or no, it can't be done quite like that. You know, we can help you come to some type of final product that will work for the majority of different issues that you might come up with.
Very good. Colleagues, we have time for one more question if you have it. Hearing no question and seeing nothing in the chat area, I think the key takeaway, Mr. Yarborough, is what you said at the end. It's incumbent upon the sponsor to design a model and then work closely with you all to help shape the parameters of what that model is, so that we can determine what makes sense and what perhaps isn't allowable. So that's the key takeaway that I'm hearing. So I want to make certain that that's something that we hold on to, and make certain that's something we drive moving forward. So I appreciate that feedback and that guidance.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, thank you for being with us this afternoon. We appreciate the conversation on the apprenticeships. At this time, we're going to transition to Ms. Olivia Rice and Ms. Edna Wallace from RTI, who's going to engage us in further conversation about the Registered Apprenticeship Programs in Education.
Thank you so much, Chair Graham. My name is Edna Wallace, and I'm here with my colleague, Olivia Rice from RTI International. Olivia, are you off of mute? We just couldn't hear you earlier.
Thank you, because I was talking, and until you spoke up, I didn't realize I was on mute. So hi, everybody. I'll do that again. I'm Olivia Rice with RTI, the Research Triangle Institute, and thank you so much, Dr. Graham, for having us here today. I'm just going to share just a little bit of information. Dale really did a great job of describing registered apprenticeship, particularly here in North Carolina. So I thought I could start by providing a little bit of information on registered apprenticeship sort of across the country, and then highlight an example of a registered apprenticeship program for teachers, share a few non-registered apprenticeship programs, and then take some questions. So next slide. Just to provide some context, in case you guys are not familiar with RTI, we are a nonprofit independent research organization. We were the first organization established in the Research Triangle Park in 1958. Next slide. I personally have been at RTI for over 19 years and have been working in our education and workforce development division, where we do a variety of work that you can see here. My specific research areas have included career and technical education, competency-based education, STEM, and then most relevant to this conversation, work-based learning and apprenticeship programs. Next slide. So, as Dale mentioned, the Registered Apprenticeship Program is a national run program. In 1937, the U.S. Congress passed the National Apprenticeship Act, which is known as the Fitzgerald Act. It was again amended in 2008 and is currently under discussion for reauthorization. As Dale mentioned, RA is a proven model with positive ROI, and one ROI point to keep in mind is retention. I know that's also a challenge, particularly in new teachers, and so the Registered Apprenticeship Program shows that most of the programs have a 92% retention rate after the apprenticeship program ends. Next slide. A little bit about the administration of registered apprenticeship. So there are 25 states in the U.S. that administer the program through the Federal Office of Apprenticeship, or OA states, as they are known. And then there are additional 28 states or territories that are operated by federally recognized state apprenticeship agencies. So North Carolina is an SAA state, and our program actually lives within our North Carolina Community College system. Next slide. Similar to our numbers here in North Carolina, you can see there has been a significant growth and interest in registered apprenticeship programs, but we did obviously see a COVID dip in 2020 as employers were just trying to make ends meet and were not able to really invest in apprenticeship programs at the time. But it is something that, there's been over 70% growth just in the last 10 years. Next slide. So when people think of apprenticeship programs, I think one of the challenges that the apprenticeship program has seen in growing is that there is a perception that apprenticeship programs are only for the trade areas. And while we still see the trades as the most common types of apprenticeship programs, in the last 2 years, over 700 programs have been created in sort of the more traditional white-collar or new-collar fields such as cybersecurity, financial services, information technology, healthcare, and other jobs. And so there's certainly space and room for these non-traditional apprenticeship programs, particularly in education. Next slide. Similarly to thinking about the trades and the requirements and certifications and credentials that they require, traditional programs have typically been in this non-credit space, but as these apprenticeship programs have been moving into different fields and industries, you can see that there have been a hybrid sort of college-connected type programs, and so there are a variety of programs out there, and as Dale said, it's really just about working with your registered apprenticeship partners and defining what you want that related technical instruction to look like. Next slide. All right, so the fun part, the apprenticeship programs for educators. So I can go to the next slide. The apprenticeship.gov website has a great resource that you can look up all of the different occupations within really all of the occupations. And then once you start to drill down, and these occupations are listed and are pulled from ONET, but you can start to search by industry. And so if you search by the education sector, currently you can see that only early childhood educators and secondary CTE teachers have an approved registered apprenticeship program right now in the USDOL system. But if you do click on the educator kind of K-12 secondary teachers link, you can see that they already have in there this. And again, this data is pulled from ONET, but they have what a sample work process might look like based on whether you do a time-based program or a competency-based program or some sort of hybrid. They also pull out of all of the competencies that occupation is supposed to have according to ONET, and those are the competencies that could be used as sort of a jump start at defining your apprenticeship program. All right, so next slide. What I was able to find in doing some research around registered apprenticeship programs, there appeared to be a registered apprenticeship program in Pennsylvania that was registered in the fall of 2019. And there were press releases, a lot of exciting news that came out that fall of 2019. And I keep referring to fall of 2019 to remind us all what happened the spring of 2020. And so unfortunately, I don't believe the Pennsylvania program was able to get off and running after they got registered. I have not been able to track anyone down that can provide more information about that program. But in this past year, a program that has actually been running since 2016 as an unregistered program officially did register with the New York Apprenticeship Agency. And this program is called the Classroom Academy. And you can see here the partners, they do run this program with their traditional college ECPs and as well as their local districts. I do have next slide, if you, Kimberly, this is actually a really short video that describes their program, and I thought they could do it better than I could. So I'll let you push play and I'll just play.
Does it work?
I don't think the sound is coming through. Well, without the sound, some of these things you're seeing on your screen might help describe this, but this is a video you guys will have access to and can look on your own. But it really does go through the benefits and what the receiving attendee teachers, as well as the apprentice teachers, it also talks about the benefits for the district. As you can see there, go ahead and go to the next slide, Kimberly. They get a $22,000 stipend, which is pretty much equivalent to what their substitute pay was in New York. And so they are coming in, and this is the 2-year pathway that you can see that they've outlined. A couple things to note here. In year one, these are not classroom teachers, and so they are working under a licensed teacher, and as they get more skills and experience, they progressively take over more of the classroom duties. So at the very beginning of the year, they're doing about 20-25% of the classroom responsibility and doing so planning. That increases to 40% by the end of the year one. By year two, they are getting 50-100% of classroom duties, as well as becoming eligible for substituting. And that is actually one of the benefits that New York has seen, is that they're able to take advantage of having somebody with that experience in their buildings for substitutes. So go to the next slide. I did want to just mention the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program, and I did note the question earlier for Dale of, why do we want to register versus an unregistered program? And I think that might be, something that this commission is going to have to really consider. What is it that we're trying to accomplish with the apprenticeship program, and would it benefit us to have it registered? But there are a lot of examples of non-registered teacher apprenticeship programs, and I did just include 3 here. Not endorsing any of them, but just if you guys wanted to kind of take a look at these further, there are some links available. Next slide. Last but not least, I did think that there were some federal RA resources that might be very helpful to you guys. So there's a quick start toolkit on how to start a program. Within that toolkit, I would actually refer you guys, there's been some conversation about sort of that framework that I just showed with New York, but how it would work here in North Carolina. And you can see on page 12 of the toolkit, there are different models for apprenticeship programs, including sort of a pre-apprenticeship model and program, as well as a traditional program, which might be spaced out over 4 years and really see progressive skill growth and sort of the spread of the related technical instruction and on-the-job training equally across the 4 years. There are also some programs that might want to front-load more of the classroom experience and related technical instruction before they get into the on-the-job training. And then there's some that might even want to do it a little bit different, where they get some of the on-the-job training as well as the classroom training. There are some models there to kind of look at and are helpful. There's also the Federal Resources Playbook for Registered Apprenticeship. That one provides helpful information on how to use federal funds and resources to support apprenticeship programs. So that might be one of the advantages of registering a future apprenticeship program, is that you might have access to some of these federal resources. Additionally, there have been a lot of grants and contracts that have been released recently from our federal government trying to grow apprenticeship programs, particularly with sectors and populations that are not typically participants in the apprenticeship program. And then that last link is just a library of additional apprenticeship resources for you. Next slide. So this time, I'm happy to take any questions.
Colleagues, if you have questions for Ms. Rice or Ms. Wallace, you'll please unmute yourself, or we'll monitor the chat. So if you'll drop your inquiry there, we'll read it for you as well. Hearing no questions and seeing nothing in the chat area, Ms. Rice and Ms. Wallace, thank you so very much for engaging us this afternoon and for sharing more information about the apprenticeship. I think a conversation that we will need to have is about the registered versus the non-registered. Very interested to see that there were a number of non-registered as opposed to the one that was registered. So I'm curious to know what the rationale might be behind those programs that chose the non-registered approach, but that's conversation I think that this group will need to have moving forward. But thank you very, very much for the conversation this afternoon.
You're very welcome. And if there is anything in the presentation, once you do start clicking on some of those resources and links that you'd like RTI to help, research further, we'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fleming, I'll pull you to the forefront here. Anything that you might want to add in reflection before we transition to the next segment of our agenda?
Well, I do enjoy, or did enjoy the presentation. Having a background in CTE, I've worked mostly with youth apprenticeships, and so I've learned a lot kind of on the adult side, and as it applies to teachers. An example there of a school district looking, or excuse me, a state school district looking at this model. But I do appreciate everybody's time from the community colleges and RTI and all. So thank you for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Colleagues, we will transition then. Please keep the apprenticeship information in your back pocket, if you will. We're going to circle back and integrate those pieces into our conversation moving forward here. Where we want to go now is circling back to the minimum salary levels for each of the licensure levels. In mid-September, I believe it was, Dr. Evans sent an email to every member of this subcommittee asking us for our input on the minimum salary for the different license levels. Our goal this afternoon, if possible, is to leave today's meeting with some consensus around the minimum salary levels for each of these license levels. So we want to leave this conversation putting the minimum salary level conversation to bed, if you will. So Dr. Evans, do you mind kind of talking us through the findings, the results of the survey inquiry?
Sure, Dr. Graham. So as a result of the survey that was sent out, and after last month's discussion, it was noted that the learning permit across the board for the groups during the August meeting, they chose $30,000 as the starting salary. And then for license one, the two figures that were noted the most often out of the ones that were proposed during the August meeting was 37,000 and then 38,000. And then license 2 and license 3, they were also set during the August meeting, and that was 40,000 for license 2 and 45,000 for license 3. And then for license 4, there were 3 figures that were noted most often during the survey results, and that was 53,000, 55,000, and 56,000. And then getting into the advanced teacher for classroom excellence, it was either 61,000 as a result of the survey or additional pay through supplement, 5,000 above license 4. And then for the last one, the licensed advanced teacher adult leadership, it was either 72,000 or additional pay through supplement, 10,000 above license 4. So those were the survey results or the results of the discussions during the August meeting.
Great, thank you, Dr. Evans. So what we'd like to do this afternoon is spend some time in discussion where there are multiple responses in spaces. We want to try to land on a number as best we can. Some of these will be easier than others, obviously. In license 2 and license 3, for example, there seems to be great consensus there, so no need for discussion. But in the area of license 1, for example, we have 37 and 38,000. We need to figure out what the minimum salary would be in that space. We just had conversation in the apprenticeship area, that learning permit. So it's set here at 30,000. We want to make certain that we feel comfortable with that amount before moving forward. And then, of course, in license 4, multiple answers there. So we've got to work through that as well as the advanced licensure areas. So I suppose we'll start in the license 1 area where we have slight discrepancy, 37 to 38,000. I want to get a feel from this group what the minimum number would be. Is it 37? Is it 38? Do you split the difference and do 37.5? Just want to hear from this group where the feeling or the sentiment is.
So, Dr. Graham, this is Marcy again from Wake.
Yes.
So given our current labor market and I still feel like there are a lot of questions around, and I know it's not our job, it's not our role as a committee, but I still feel like there are too many questions, for me at least, about what the minimum qualifications are going to be and what the expectations are going to be with respect to minimum performance standards, because we still don't know what those performance standards are to say with certainty how I feel about these salaries. I have been in HR for over 20 years now, and it has taken me about this long to really understand compensation and market studies and market comparabilities for job-alike kind of circumstances and situations. So I don't feel like we have a sure enough ground, at least for me to say that I feel confident with anything below whatever the maximum we could possibly offer would be. Because I don't know what those things look like. So I will just say that. I think that it needs to be clear when these recommendations go forward. We've got a very tight timeline that these be recommendations and that there be a little bit more study done once all of the 4 committees' works are put together to make sure that at that point compensation is aligned to the duties and responsibilities and expectations going forward. But I say we start at 38. I wouldn't feel comfortable asking someone who has a 4-year degree, who's in the role doing something on their own, standing on their own, paying them less than that.
Marcy, thank you for your honest feedback, and we have noted your concerns. I agree with you. So we will make certain that we have some additional conversation in this space. And your earlier point at the top of the meeting about making certain that we are conferring with our HR professionals, if and in an advisory capacity, even if they're not members of this subcommittee, being able to meet with those professionals and put before them what we're thinking along with those criteria that you alluded to. I think that will be critically important before this work goes anywhere, as a kind of a strategy to take to ensure that we've bounced it off the professionals to make certain that it would make sense in application and not just something that we're proposing theoretically. So I think that's a fantastic recommendation. So, but I did hear you loud and clear with the 38,000, and I am of the same mindset when it comes to budget. I always go high and then force people to walk me down. So I agree with the 38,000. Is there anyone, or are there any folk on this call who would be opposed to going with the 38,000?
This is Catherine. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I just want to make sure that I understand that a licensed one teacher in residency would apply to, for example, a new college grad who is not a licensed two because he has not passed his, for example, might not have passed the Foundations of Reading exam, or if we still have the praxis, et cetera. Is that correct?
I believe so, but I'm going to look to our DPI colleagues to make certain.
And another question onto that would be, would this be the same as a teacher who is going through a teacher ed program, didn't make the GPA? That came up in a conversation I had lately too. So they graduated 4 year, clearly not as a teacher ed candidate because they didn't have all the requirements. But is that correct that they would fall in the same category?
And then it would also apply to someone who has perhaps been working in finance, who has a 4-year degree, who decides to do quote unquote lateral entry. And they start teaching and they have a certain amount of time to pass their licensure exams, which we are saying is demonstrated mastery of content or pedagogy. So they would be in that license one category until they can prove that they have demonstrated mastery of content or pedagogy by passing certain assessments.
Dr. Graham, this is Tom.
Yes.
Do you mind if I jump in on this?
Yes, please, sir.
Okay. So these are great questions. So the way the license one is interpreted currently is that this person meets the minimum qualifications to hold a license in the state of North Carolina, which is that is the possession of a bachelor's degree. But there's no expectation that that person has demonstrated any skill in the classroom. As a result of that definition, I can tell you that the preparation and entry subcommittee, which is kind of determining what one needs to be placed in these licenses, has some serious reservations about making that person a standalone teacher of record. So their argument is if we're building a better model, it's not good practice to throw somebody with absolutely no teaching experience or no demonstrated skill into a classroom. We've seen from lateral entry that that's what more than likely leads to the high attrition rates of career changers in the teaching profession. So one of the things that they're considering is that this license area must be connected or must be served by an advanced teacher in a license 4+ teacher in order to operate in a classroom. And we're talking about, at what level oversight that would be. It certainly wouldn't be like at the apprentice model where you're not the teacher of record, you're basically a teacher assistant working towards the requirement to hold the full license. But this is something that's being considered by the prep and entry group. And then license 2, you've demonstrated some minimal level of competence, either by passing those tests or some kind of demonstrated mastery that you're qualified to lead a classroom as the teacher of record with more limited oversight from that teacher of record. And then license 3 is fully functional. So to go back to Dr. Holland's question about, what are those classifications? I really sensitive to that question because that's what the prep and entry group are grappling with right now, is answering that question. And we're trying to recognize that right now what districts have is one license. You get people licensed and they have varying levels of skill, and there's no clear indication of what the appropriate assignment would be. And that's one of the purposes we're trying to serve here for districts, is to let folks know, at what level these teachers would have autonomy in the classroom and at what level these teachers need really dedicated support in order to function in the classroom. And none of this to me is an argument against the license 1 being situated at $38,000 a year. But if that requirement for some serious monitoring and oversight of the license 1 is what the prep and entry subcommittee moves forward with, that does have budget implications for districts, because you would have to have another license 4 teacher available to that license 1 teacher in order to successfully employ them in a classroom situation.
Okay, so the preparation committee aside, which by the way, they have brought up some excellent points. If we're trying to build a better model, are we going to continue as a state to allow the practice of folks who have no teacher training but a degree in a content area to make even more money than what our year 1 teachers make now? So that's a separate conversation, but I want to point out that if we for all intents and purposes are saying that our starting salary is either $37,000 or $38,000 a year, we are still going to rank behind, let's see, I can tell you right now that the only states in the South that start at less than $37,000 a year are Mississippi and Arkansas. So if we want to just look at Florida, Florida pays more money. They're almost at $39,000 a year to start. So we're technically right now, without the supplement, our starting salary is the lowest in the South.
Mr. Chairman, if I can say this, and I agree with Superintendent Truitt on this, I do think in some of the small groups, or in mine in particular, but I've heard from a few of you too, that there's a concern of kind of this shooting for the moon, and I certainly think being the lowest is something we want to shoot higher for, but then again, we don't want to go somewhere that is just crazy town. So I have a feeling some of the reasons why we landed at this range from, I'm looking back, 35 to 38 originally. It looks like, it's from a fear of some of that. And so I don't, as much as I do agree completely with that, and it may be something we need to revisit, I do believe we had a little bit of a concern there of how high is too high in going to the legislature or making that request, and not able to get close to that number that we would originally ask for.
Well, the license too at 40K is great, but right now it reads to me like an incentive. It's an incentive to not just become a lateral entry or teacher in residency, but I don't think we're incentivizing people to do a career change into education when we start them at 37 or 38.
Right, especially if they're in private industry for a while, and I agree.
Exactly. Even though I totally agree with the preparation committee that, golly, if we want to really take a stand on teacher quality, then we should have concerns that we're continuing to allow people to enter the classroom and then and not have had a single methods class. And at the same time, I can hear the legislature in my ear saying, what that would mean Bill Gates can't teach in North Carolina. You know what they say. So or anyone with a math degree should be able to come in and start teaching high school math, even if they haven't had any pedagogy, which this allows for, but it's still at less than $40,000 a year.
I do, yeah, I agree with that. And I know, Tom, you've got your, Dr. Tomlin, I know you've got your hand raised there. Maybe.
Dr. Tomlin, did you have a comment? Your hand was raised, or is raised. Clarification question, Superintendent Truitt, and thank you, Brenda, for dropping the scale in the chat area. I see these are the average starting salaries for people with bachelor's not fully certified or certified.
I don't, it's the data we have just says bachelor's, so we don't know if they're certified or not. But our number includes, where it says North Carolina 37049, that includes an average $5,000 supplement. So that's an average.
I'll also add, just when we're thinking about those, that wonderful dashboard that Andy put together, a $1,000 here or there on license one isn't going to change that bottom line that much. There just aren't a whole lot of license one teachers in this model, and it's $1,000. Where I would say, if we're really looking at sort of what that bottom line is, if we're thinking about learning permit being a new position, every single one of those dollars times every single one of those positions is new money. That's where if we're going to look at sort of $30,000 is $5,000 more than Texas pays for the same kind of concept. I think we're trying to figure out, what, people they're not the teacher of record. It's a new position. They're people who are willing to kind of try it on. They might be, juggling two jobs. I get it, but it's a 1 or 2 year, apprenticeship. I'd say that if we really want to be looking at the bottom line cost, that learning permit number might be a little bit high, but I think pinching pennies at license one, it's not going to save a whole lot of money on the line item. And as Superintendent Truitt pointed out, 38 doesn't even put us in the top 3 in the Southeast. So just throwing that out.
I wonder, everybody, if this is, and I am enjoying this conversation because I see, I think about our conversations again from the past and then the comments that Superintendent Truitt is making here. At what point should we, and Mr. Chairman and Brenda would be good for this piece, and certainly Superintendent Truitt, at what point we should take these numbers, the 40,000, and really take to some fiscal folks that can, within the department and potentially even the legislature, that can price all this out to a real accurate number. And then with Chairman Miller's permission on that too, and others involved, just kind of have a conversation before we go and completely present this to the full PEPSC commission on these numbers, of just kind of having some thoughts of some various legislators taking a look, those working with appropriations and all, to just say, here's where our group is going. We certainly would not commit them to any thumbs up or not or anything like that, but just, you know, to give them an idea that we may come with this number we've got on the screen now, or may come with a higher number. I just feel like there's probably some of these things that within this subcommittee and really within PEPSC at large that we can't answer, and we want our work to matter and we want our work to count. But at the end of the day, I don't want us to be so low that we really didn't move the needle, kind of like Brenda was saying, the $1,000 here and there. But on the other side, I know I use the word shooting for the moon often, or too much probably, but are we, you know, we don't want to do that either. So I would be curious to hear people's thoughts on that. I really feel like, and I've had some individual conversations with a couple of you as well, of, well, is this really the idea that the legislature wants to go with, or should we really push for more? And so I don't want to take up more time than we need to, but I am very curious to hear everyone's thoughts on that, and certainly Superintendent Truitt, what your thoughts would be around this when it comes to maybe your school and business finance folks working with fiscal and all on the, or OSBM or whoever it may be.
Yeah, and Alexis is ready to cost this out whenever we're ready to share.
And I did see, thank you, Dr. Graham, so you need to step away for a moment. And Brenda's correct too, this is before local supplements. But again, for a few of us, local supplements help out. A few of us, they'll help out a little. And I know there's a few of us in the far west and far east that may not add much, if anything, to these numbers. So I do agree. Thank you, Brenda.
Dr. Fleming, could I share something?
Yes, please.
So I wanted to let the subcommittee know that you were talking about sharing with PEPSC and being able to get the impressions of these figures prior to providing the entire recommendation. And that is something that we've talked to Dr. Miller about, the DPI staff has, when we've had check-ins, and he has thought that that is a good idea to provide information as recommendations come along, or big chunks of information, or more specific pieces of information or results from subcommittee meetings during the monthly PEPSC meeting. So that is something that you can share during the monthly PEPSC meeting starting in October. So we have discussed that with him to then stem any type of discussion from the PEPSC members ahead of the formal recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. And that may be the appropriate place for us to share that. Because I do think we've got to start getting some of this information out, just for a litmus test of, are we headed in the right direction? So thank you. Just making notes of that, because I will forget that. Well, thank you. Again, I know Dr. Graham had to step away unless he's back, but we can continue to move on, and we can continue to have discussions on this if you would like. Any further thoughts on what anyone has shared so far on kind of the starting salary?
Dr. Fleming, if you'll note, some folks have entered in the chat concerns about
Yes.
other categories of positions and no, that's not the direct work of this, but we would be, I think, negligent in our duties if we didn't at least acknowledge that there has to be other classifications that should be addressed, at least, if not now as part of this recognition of, and a need to address those going forward. Because if you start looking at, we're just thinking about 30,000 as the learning permit in our area, and you're very close to us, our local government here is progressing salaries for employees. The state agencies have progressed salaries for employees. So we're struggling to attract and retain other individuals based on those increases. And it's not part of this discussion, but again, I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge it as part of this, because it's going to continue to impact in waves across the state.
Absolutely, and we're because you guys are close to us, we do see that, and not just in certified positions above the teacher, but in classified positions as well. So I agree completely that we have to look across the board, even though it may not be the charge of the committee. It needs to be someone's charge. Take a look at all the positions within a school building and a school district, not just teachers, and again, looking at administrators as well, principals and AP schedule too. Thank you.
Dr. Fleming?
Yes, go right ahead.
This is Tom Tomberlin. I do want to say, and I think that we could articulate this in whatever final product this committee brings, that question of addressing other roles in schools besides the teacher falls under the human capital portion of Superintendent Truitt's Polaris project. So, I mean, I think it's already been articulated that is a piece that's on the mind, and I don't want to speak for the superintendent, so Superintendent Truitt, jump in if you want to address this.
That's good to hear. I apologize. I don't want us to step out of our role, but at least we know it's being addressed, so that's good.
No, I mean, I appreciate that, but I'm relying on the commission to, I'm relying on the human capital satellite of Operation Polaris to take the recommendations of PEPSC.
Hey, that sounds like we have more work then. But
so that's the next round of work for this subcommittee.
Yeah, 2.0.
Right.
Bill, great question. Will this committee ever meet in person to discuss these major concerns for submitting a final project? I don't believe so, but I don't know if Dr. Evans has an official answer on that from the department.
At this time, we are staying virtual.
Could we revisit Andy's estimates on percent of teachers who would be getting a raise at these different salary thresholds? I think we can. I think right now yes, I believe so. I think that would be right because I know he has the tools to do that. But I know when you're looking at a beginning teacher, license one, teacher, we know kind of that's where you're starting. I haven't heard from many of you or any of you on the numbers as they increase through license 2, 3, and on in the advanced. But it seemed that we've had some good consensus there. The 37 and 38 we're not too far off, but again, now I know we're kind of questioning that. So I think our focus and our concern at the moment is on license one and potentially the apprenticeship learning permit side too. But I'm incorrect in that. Please correct me.
So
I don't know if
I think revisiting the estimates on the percentage of teachers we estimate would fall into these buckets is possible, but I want to caution everybody that this isn't really an exact science, because we're taking some metrics that exist under the current system and trying to use those to anticipate where people would fall on the new system. And that's just it's not going to work out exactly the way we think it's going to. And just to refresh your memory, we're looking at a license 1 person is not having passed either the content or pedagogy requirement. License 2 is having passed one of them, and license 3 is having passed both. But as you know, as the work of the other subcommittees moves forward, that might look a little different in the final product. There's a lot of talk about not really separating content and pedagogy, but looking at varying degrees of proficiency within both those things. And so that puts us in the realm of, we're just not sure where teachers are going to fall out in this once we make the final determination of what constitutes a license 1 versus a license 2 versus a license 3. So, I mean, we can tinker with that all day long, but I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to confidently say, this is how many teachers in the state would fall into these buckets.
And I think it's fair enough to say too, Dr. Tomlin, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because we're trying to redo this model and compensation model, you would hope that you have more teachers coming in to the teaching profession, which means you would have more people. I know we're not doing license 1, 2, 3 now, but if you compare that to a beginning teacher, we hope to have more beginning teachers that went through, regardless of how they got here. We hope to have more beginning teachers because we have reset the salary schedule, correct? Which means the numbers now should be low.
Right. And that brings me to something I meant to address when we were talking about the average salary or the beginning teacher salary. We also have to understand that with this model, what's going to be different about this model from other states is not all first-year teachers are going to have the same salary. So you will have, it is our strong hope that under this model that thousands of teachers coming out of our traditional ed prep programs would enter their first year of teaching at the license 3 level, which would be $45,000 a year. And then you've got teachers that may come out of license 2 and license 1. Those are all first year teachers. And with the method of calculation, if we're looking at just first year teachers for these comparisons, this should lift the average starting salary above that $38,000 that we're thinking about for the license 1.
Great point. That's right. And I have to remember to not do that as well. And I caution everyone else that these aren't all A0 teachers or, that are coming in and won't. And even though we're not looking at it through the same lens, they could be coming in as a license 3 and not what we think, right? And now they're coming in at the level of experience. So that's another way to look at it, I guess, is where I'm going with that. They're not all coming in that are teachers at 35.5 now.
This is Dan, and I want to piggyback on that point that most of the teachers that we will hire are going to be license 3. I think Brenda said it, that license 1, we're sort of haggling over $1,000, but right now, not a extensive amount of teachers are coming in through like this license 1 area or license 2 area. We're hiring mostly EPP teachers. So I think we're starting at license 1, but we don't need to think about that as the starting point. It's really more shaded towards license 3. And that's when you look at averages, we're well above. I feel like we're doing well because Texas is 44, our license 3 is 45. That's even before supplements. I think we're better than what we think when we take that perspective.
Thank you, Dan. That's wonderful, because you have to say that to me too, because I get into this idea that that's correct. You're coming out of the EPP, typically at license 3 in particular, everyone coming through a regular teacher ed program. So thank you for saying that. I agree. We're talking about a couple thousand here, but it's a much smaller group, and that helps me refocus a little too, that I don't go down the wrong road in the discussion. So thank you.
So for clarity around that, because it's interesting to put it into that perspective, I guess, where would our current practice experienced residency individuals, say they're a residency person and they've got 10 years as an instructional assistant, that now they can get 10 years of steps of experience and start higher than that person who would be coming out of an EPP as a traditional grad, or a private industry person, or even a college professor who can get credit for teaching experience? How would they fall into this if we just have a flat salary that's not going to, I'm just concerned about being competitive for salaries there. Tom or someone, can you help give me kind of a picture of how that would look and what that would look like for these groups?
So this model does not contemplate years of experience. And so I'm not sure whether you're talking about from a hold harmless perspective, or if you're talking about I'm new to the profession and I'm bringing some experience with me. Can you clarify that when you say our veteran teachers that have 10 years of experience, to me that's a hold harmless issue, but the other way of thinking about that is I'm a residency teacher who's been in the workforce for 10, 15 years. How are we compensating them for that experience from the field?
Yeah, I think that's probably, Tom, where my concerns lied. Right now, we would get them non-teaching experience credit. We'd go through the process, and we could have a first-year teacher who gets 10 years on their license because they've been in private industry or they've been an instructional assistant for us since they got their degree, and they're now just entering the profession to be a classroom teacher. And we can get them experience credit. So since we're not addressing experience credit in any of this, my understanding is they would fall in at license 1, correct? Yeah. If they're not a program completer already.
That's correct.
Okay, so someone who today could walk in and start at 45 because they've got X number of years of experience would start at 37 or 38 by comparison. So we're paying them for the education specific and pedagogy that they have versus the experience that they might be bringing to the classroom from their other life. I just want to make sure I'm wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, so another way to think about it is we're paying them for the skills they have demonstrated. So I think in that regard, if it is somebody that's being an instructional assistant for 10 years, presumably those people will have developed those skills and be able to move quickly through this, if not bring those evidences with them when they apply for the teaching license. I don't think, I don't know how we keep, putting the hold harmless aside for a minute, I don't know how we keep, in a model like this, I don't know how we keep 1 foot in the old model and then move to a new model. And I'm saying that honestly. I don't know what that looks like. How you ever make that shift if you're constantly keeping the features of the old model in play in the new model. But I think it's...
Yeah, I was not proposing that, and I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the shift. So that's gonna be a challenge. Just for those of us that are old and have been around since dirt, it's gonna be hard, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Fleming, if I could just really quickly, I know time's probably growing short, just some of the issues that come up in the chat, particularly the difference across regions on the availability of license 1 versus 2 versus 3. And I want to be sensitive to that. I don't know if it's directly the work of this subcommittee to address that equity issue, but it is true that certain regions, particularly the Northeast and the Sandhills region, rely more on residency licensed teachers to populate their in their hiring process, which are going to put them at more license 1 teachers, and they get far fewer license 3 teachers. And we are going to see this equity situation play out with those in the more metropolitan areas, probably being able to differentially garner the folks coming in at license 3 level, while the rurals have a lot more difficulty attracting those license 3 folks.
I think that's probably a fair assessment. Definitely.
Aaron,
all right.
Aaron, this is Ethan in Pitt County. Just piggyback on what was just said. I've had conversations with my Northeast counterparts here. We're a little lucky, obviously, here in Pitt County, but some of them have shared with me that they have not had a licensed math teacher apply for a job in multiple years. I mean, not like 1 or 2, like 4 or 5. And then I've talked with some of my counterparts, over along I-77 in the western part of the state. Well, they've not hired anybody that's lateral entry ever. That's just some things that if you're looking at that we really need to. Again, I'm not sure if this is our job, but that's something that's real, right? It's real here in Pitt County too, but it's really real when you go up farther northeast compared to the west in the mountains. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I think the availability of teachers too also depend on the institution somewhat. I can see just as I've been across state, sometimes there's certain teachers you can find in some parts of the state than others. But I know in the Northeast it's extremely tough, especially that they've only got really one program close to them in state.
Right.
So, absolutely. And Ethan can get his pick from just a mile or 2 down the road, right?
Well, I don't know if I can get my pick or not, but I wish. But even East Carolina, this past year, the dean just told me they graduated 380 licensed teachers. They have 120 freshmen in the program. Mm-hmm. We can do the math, right? I saw in the chat 38% are coming through maybe traditional programs. That number is going to drop quickly. Mm-hmm.
This is Amy Holcomb, High Point University. I just had a meeting yesterday with our undergraduate recruitment VP, and they're concerned about our trending down. We're experiencing the same thing. People are not choosing to go into education. We've been able to hold our line steady for several years, but as working conditions become more public in the media and as salaries stay fairly stagnant, more people are making other choices. And in fact, those that we are graduating, of those that we are graduating, 80% are choosing to go out of state because salaries are higher. I'm very concerned about our students across the state and the long-term impact of the decisions that we make today. I proposed in the chat box that it might be worthwhile to propose a model that is within budget so that we're not holding this process up, but to also propose a model that is responsive to the market and reflects what it would actually take in order to reverse this trend and start attracting top talent back into our profession and resolve this problem once and for all. I think that we owe it to our elected officials to say, if you want the real solution, this is the price tag. We know you can't afford it right now, but at least you know what the real answer is.
All right, any other comments? And I apologize, I've not kept up with the chat too well here. They're good questions.
And I didn't mean for that to be the very last comment. That was sort of a depressing line to end.
No, exactly. We've got to go out and start.
I think there's the realistic model, and then there is the very bold, a budget were not a consideration model. And at least that gives people a sense of where are we in relation to what it would really take to ameliorate this issue in North Carolina.
I agree. That's exactly and the way I'm thinking as well. And Jackie puts, we face the problems and we're blamed for not attracting enough students in teacher ed programs. Exactly. And I think with just a lot of things going on out there, parents are, and unfortunately even teachers, I've heard it before, but are encouraging students to not go into education. And again, that's a huge concern, probably not one as a committee we can work on, but one that I try to work on every day, quite honestly, when I talk to students and teachers and community members. Dr. Evans, where do you feel like we need to kind of go from here?
Do you feel that we have about 12 minutes left? Mm-hmm. Do we want to think about continuing this conversation next meeting and discussing this during co-chair check-in?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is just my thoughts. Again, we'll open it up for anybody else. I think we've got to have a conversation again at these levels. And since we know that, what I will say again, the alternative, or excuse me, I'll just say right now, residency, lateral entry, however you want to say it right now, that I didn't realize it was that high. More than half are coming in that direction, and 38% are coming around traditional. So with all that said, I think we've got to, we may need to focus on the lower licenses a little more. And I wonder from Superintendent Truitt's comments and all, if there's a way for her to be a part of when we talk as co-chairs, at least through this section and moving forward, if she could be a part of that, and Chairman Miller too, if we need to include him as well.
I just want to let you know, if we include Dr. Miller, then we would need to have a public meeting.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Scratch that thought. Then my suggestion at this point is, yes, let's try to wrap this up, but certainly have a conversation on this at our next meeting, and a final conversation if we can, because we then have to get into our other buckets of our other task for the committee as well, so that we can stay on course. Any thoughts on that?
So Dr. Fleming, I'm sorry. I had to step away for a minute. I think I missed some confusion that might have occurred. When I quoted, in the chat, I quoted 38% of our teachers come through a traditional program. I did not mean to suggest that then 62% come through a residency program. We're also calculating out-of-state teachers coming into the system.
Okay. They're fully licensed. Yeah.
So it is a plurality. It's still, I think, the plurality of teachers come through the EPP, traditional EPP programs, but it's closer to like a third between EPP, residency, and out-of-state. Sorry if I caused any confusion.
No, thanks for clarifying that. So I see what you're saying, though. Yeah. Thank you. We still have a large task at hand, but I do appreciate the comment or the clarity. All right, Dr. Evans, I think if we're done having the conversation on this today, we can, because I don't want people to be so tired they're not able to think about anything else. But I do think we can wrap this up our next meeting. And so I will go back to you to loop or have you come back in just to share with us anything else as far as tasks that we need to accomplish next time and our next meeting.
Well, as far as these survey results, we can continue this discussion. We had also talked about focusing on the professional accounts and thinking about details there for those accounts. So that was kind of our next steps after discussing these survey results.
And we can move into that if you'd like. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, this was the first item that we were definitely going to discuss today. So.
Well, very good. I know everybody got quiet on it, so I didn't want to belabor this point. Would you like to kick off that conversation now?
About the professional.
Yeah, or do you want that to be a part of our next meeting?
We can make that a part of the next meeting.
I know
is absolutely.
Got about 7 minutes left. I just don't want.
I don't want to rush anything.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Been discussing the results here, so.
Very good. Well, thank you. Well, is any closing thoughts from Dr. Evans, Dr. Tomberlin? Not sure if Superintendent Truitt's back, and not sure if Co-Chair Graham is back. But any closing thoughts from anyone? I am not hearing any. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to clarify the question from Chad Alderman about revisiting the percentages. I interpreted that as kind of adjusting the percentages. I don't know if that's what he meant, or if he just mean, can we look at those again? Because if he wants us to take a better stab at putting people into these buckets for this group and for that tool, we can work on that. I don't know if that's a directive from the group or if it's just I wanted to look at that again.
Yeah, I was just suggesting that it be part of the conversation. So not necessarily revisiting the data. I know they're estimates, but they seemed relevant to the conversation we were having.
I see. All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Absolutely. So I am just looking, I'm scrolling through my calendar. I need the right date here. I believe our next meeting will be 1:30 p.m. on Thursday, October 28th. That is what I'm showing on my calendar. And so I look forward to seeing everyone then. And we will continue this conversation again and get into our other tasks that we have to discuss. So Before I say goodbye and that we're adjourned, I just want to again give an opportunity for anyone to share anything before we close out. And I just want to make sure in case Dr. Graham or Superintendent Truitt came back that they were able to give some closing thoughts. And I'm not hearing from them. So we will adjourn and we will see everyone towards the end of October on the 28th at 1:30. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day and a good weekend ahead. Take care.
Could we have a motion for adjournment?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Monica Lambert.
In a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Hearing none, motion to adjourn has passed. Thank you. We are adjourned.